So our next speaker, which you'll hear a lot about, is best known for a long and successful career as a younger person on the most famously for the TV series The O.C. He continues to keep his career going in acting, but has much more recently established himself really as the most prominent critic of cryptocurrencies as they currently stand. And he is about to release, or actually in the UK it's actually now available, a new book called Easy Money. And he joins us from, I believe, Brooklyn to speak with us today. So can we bring Ben? Oh, there he is. Fantastic. Hey, Ben. Thanks so much for joining us. And hopefully, can you hear and see me okay?
Yes, you've been cutting in and out, but I can hear you now.
Okay, great, fantastic. So first off, I mean, I think just to kind of get everyone on the same page, because not everyone perhaps is familiar with your well, not previous career, but how you became sort of best known for. So can you just tell us a little bit about the OC and your other television projects?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I've starred in 3 television series. The OC was the first one, teenage soap opera set in Newport Beach, California. Then I went on to Southland, which was an LA-based cop show. And then most recently Gotham, which was a series set in the world of Batman, but centering on a young Commissioner Gordon, which is the character I played as a rookie detective. So 3 shows, more or less back to back to back. Spent about 15 years working in television. But previous to that, I have a degree in economics. And so that's sort of what led me to investigating cryptocurrency.
Okay, fantastic. So I guess, I mean, how did you, going from that, despite your background in economics, how did you become this, what was your journey into becoming this obviously highly vocal and visible crypto critic?
Sure. Well, it started with a sort of mini midlife crisis. The pandemic hit in March here in New York, and the entertainment industry was put on ice. Obviously, it's hard to act opposite your colleagues if you have to stay 6 feet apart. So I had a lot of time on my hands. And later that year in 2020 and in early 2021, I realized the markets were sort of going berserk. I think everyone was, at least somewhat aware of this. This was the era of meme stocks and Elon Musk going on SNL to shield Dogecoin and stuff like that. And I guess I got FOMO. I mean, that's basically the long and short of it, is I saw these knuckleheads getting rich, and I figured, hey, if they can do it, maybe I can. But as soon as I had sort of set up an account to start trading for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't actually know what to get. And that led me to reading a lot, particularly economic history. And I realized, I came to the conclusion that we were in somewhat of a bubble. Easy money bubble, so to speak, brought on by, well, initially the reaction to the subprime crisis, but that had escalated even further in response to the pandemic. The government's, well, the U.S. government in particular, was very worried about an economic crash, understandably so, and so pumped an enormous amount of money into the economy. Historically speaking, when there is a lot of easy money, people speculate wildly in search of higher returns. That leads to a lot of fraud because it's difficult to separate truly innovative technologies or businesses from those that are basically predicated on hype and or fraud. So it became kind of a pandemic hobby of mine to start sort of betting against fraudulent companies. And in a roundabout way, that led me to crypto.
Okay, cool. So am I correct in thinking that you never actually, did you actually bet against crypto, or were you long on investing in crypto?
Yeah, I ended up betting a little bit against crypto. I bet against a bunch of other businesses that I suspected were either fraudulent or overvalued. The way I got into crypto was a friend of mine who, when I was in my 20s, had given me the worst financial advice of my life. He had encouraged me to invest in this, what was effectively a penny stock, and we both promptly lost most of our money. He was obviously not scamming me. He was a victim too. But
Yeah.
20 years later, as I was investing in fraud, he came back to me and said I should buy Bitcoin. And so I thought, what is this stuff? And that led me down a rabbit hole.
Okay.
Initially, I was interested in investing because, of course, I saw so many people, at least theoretically, getting rich on it. But I was really puzzled by it almost from the beginning because, of course, economically speaking, these are not currencies. And words have meaning. As a storyteller, I know this well. Words are a tool. So the fact that cryptocurrencies were not functioning as money was it was initially very confusing, and it led me down a whole sort of rabbit hole as to understand exactly what they are, which is, in my opinion, securities, only unregistered, unlicensed ones. And that led me to basically believing that this was at a minimum a massive speculative bubble that was going to pop when the easy money went away. Mm-hmm. And at worst, effectively the largest Ponzi scheme in history.
Okay, strong words. So you mentioned something in passing when we were setting up the test about that fundamentally, because it's all private money, that this is an inherently bad thing. Could you just unpack that a little bit as to why that makes it fundamentally a bad thing?
Sure. So cryptocurrencies are not operating as currencies currently, but if they were to operate as currencies, we actually have a history of that. The folks that advocate for crypto don't necessarily like to talk about this, but an obvious question is if the state is not issuing the money, like a nation state, then who is? Well, in this case, it would be cryptocurrency mining firms, right? I mean, how does Bitcoin created? Well, it's created by mining Bitcoin, right? These computers running endlessly. Other cryptocurrencies can be created effectively out of thin air, but they're issued by companies. They may try to call themselves different things, but they are companies. We have a history of this. In the United States, it was called the free banking era, 1837 to 1864. The United States was obviously in a much different place, and states were allowed to banks were allowed to get charters from the states as long as they held a certain amount of state bonds, and then issue their own notes, effectively their own currencies. It did not work very well. The banks collapsed all the time. The state bonds were very volatile, but there was also a lot of fraud. This was also known as the wildcat banking era. You would set up your bank chapter as far away from your customers as possible, where the wildcats roamed, and that made it very difficult for your depositors, your customers, to actually get their money out. So there was very little preventing you from actually just sort of running off with their money, and this happened quite a lot. So unfortunately, when you take something that is, in my opinion, effectively a public good, which is our monetary system. We all need a functional monetary system in order to live our lives. When you take a public good and you privatize it, you have a lot of problems. And money in particular is very problematic because what's stopping massive multi-billion-dollar corporations from manipulating us even further?
All right. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess the FTX story, the collapse around FTX, I guess, is exactly that, taking someone's money and then either through I guess we're going to discover whether it was knowing fraud or just simply incompetence or perhaps a combination of both.
And they often run together. Incompetence and a failure often leads to committing fraud. Auditors talk about the fraud triangle, which is need, opportunity, and rationalization. The need to commit fraud can often happen because you've made a mistake, because you sort of get behind. You think of a rogue trader on a desk. He bets too much on some particular financial instrument. He gets behind. He doesn't want to admit his mistake, and so he bets more and more and more, and it spirals out of control. And then you find, the rogue trader is arrested for losing billions of dollars on a desk that was never supposed to cover a fraction of that. So in terms of FTX, we don't know yet. We'll have to let the legal system play out. but it wouldn't be surprising if it started with, people don't necessarily intend to commit fraud initially, but they end up committing it because they make a mistake.
Right, yeah. Well, I think that is that roughly the Barings Bank story with Nick Leeson, someone getting in trouble and then just continuing to double down to try and to cover his losses till the whole thing exploded, and hence no more Barings Bank. And I think he also spent some time in jail for that. So I mean, there are other things like UST, which I think is that the so-called Terra Luna stablecoin.
Right.
Which was fronted by, I think, is it an ex-Goldman Sachs banker, Mike Novogratz? He may not have been my ex-Goldman Sachs, so I'm not trying to tar them in case their lawyers are listening.
But yeah, Do Kwon was the guy that originally created it. Novogratz was a proponent of it. I don't.
Oh,
I
right.
don't
Okay, yeah. So I mean, that obviously was marketed as a stable coin, and I mean, obviously, it collapsed basically from the moment it went public. Is that correct?
No, I mean, he was able to keep the plates spinning for a while, but it did collapse in spectacular fashion in May of last year. One of the things you'll notice about cryptocurrencies is that the words they use are usually the opposite in terms of their actual functionality. Stable coins are not stable. Currencies are not currencies, obviously. Decentralized actually means centralized, as you saw with Terra Luna. Because Terra Luna collapsed and Do Kwon tried to disappear. They ultimately caught him in Montenegro, where he is still trying to post bail. Look, when you create this private money that's unregulated and unlicensed, what's stopping people from committing fraud? There isn't anything, really. And so there's really no, economists look at incentive structures. There's really no incentive for anyone when value is being transferred, between people at any juncture in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. There's really nothing disincentivizing people from committing fraud. I mean, if you can do it and get away with it, which I would argue many, many people have done over the years in crypto, why not try it? You might get away with it too. So I think we're sort of seeing rubber hit the road here as the easy money has gone away and the Fed and other central banks, including the Bank of England, have had to raise interest rates. The speculation has gone out. The retail customers are no longer there. And the whole thing falls apart because all of the prices of these cryptocurrencies had been manipulated, had been built up, sometimes quasi-legally through leverage and other things that exist in our regulated financial system, but sometimes through fraud, through things like wash trading, where you basically can set up as many accounts as you want, trade it back and forth amongst accounts you control, inflating the price, but there's no real actual demand for that, or very little. And so when retail leaves, the whole thing falls apart.
Okay. So one of the things there's really two questions here. One is, why go so public with this? And I guess you've turned it into almost, if you will, a one-man campaign. I mean, I realize there are many people, but very few prominent people have been as vocal and, going so far as to testify before the Senate, among other organizations. You've kind of almost built effectively a second career to parallel your primary career. What was the thinking there?
Well, I had been interested in fraud and kind of, betting the various fraudulent companies were going to go down. But when I stumbled upon crypto, I was troubled by the fact that unlike the other fraudulent companies that were publicly listed that had to go through disclosure processes because they were, registered securities, cryptocurrency didn't have any of that. No disclosures. They were being sold to the general public. In the United States, an estimated 40 to 50 million Americans bought crypto. I would imagine the equivalent number in the UK is, at least over 10 million. So just massive, massive numbers of people were buying these things that I suspected were essentially valueless. Eventually, given a long enough time frame, economically speaking, they should all revert to zero. And that troubled me because I don't think people understood that, and they weren't being marketed that way. Some of the most famous people in the world were marketing them as a way to bank the unbanked, build generational wealth, the future of money, which is hilarious because, of course, it's the past of money. It's private money. But anyway, I was troubled by that. So I was reading my daughter, who was 6 at the time, The Emperor's New Clothes. And I was struck by the fact that essentially the tailors trick everyone, all of the adults, by appealing to their ego and status worship. They say only the smartest people can see these beautiful clothes we weave, only the people of highest station. And the second thing that stuck with me was the end of the story. As the emperor is gallivanting through town naked and all the adults pretend not to notice, it's a child who calls out the lie. The only one brave enough to speak truth to power is someone who doesn't know he's being brave. He's simply speaking the truth. It was hard to not put myself in the place of the child. I am just an actor. I've spent 20 years, more or less, working in show business. But then again, I know about money because I have a degree in economics and I've made a little in showbiz. But I know about lying because I'm an actor and I do it for a living. And they were lying. So many people were lying so flagrantly in ways both big and small. And I felt a duty and an obligation. So I took some edibles, some medical marijuana, and thought, I should write a book about this. And that led me to reaching out to this journalist, Jacob Silverman.
You're getting a round of applause here.
Yes, good. Edibles. Yes, we must destigmatize marijuana use. And I took him out to drinks. This was about 2 years ago in Brooklyn, where we both live, and said, hey, what if we write a book about a book I don't know how to write about events that haven't happened yet? And he was about to go on parental leave, and so he foolishly agreed, and our journey began.
Fantastic. Well, listen, are there any other well-established critics of cryptocurrency?
Oh, yes. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I am not by any means the only one. There are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of critics of varying degrees. I'm just the only one who was a former teen idol, so I get a public speech. But people have been calling bull on crypto since there's been crypto.
Oh no, I can't think of anyone. I can think of all the people that were paid to pump it, of course, but because they're of course massive celebrities, as you've already said. But I'm just thinking, is there like a Paul Krugman's sort of scale economist that's been very public about their criticism?
I think there have been 7 Nobel Prize-winning economists who've said crypto's effectively a bubble. The problem is that until it crashes, no one really wants to hear that.
Right. Fair enough.
And so people have been calling out for years. In terms of crypto skeptics, I just want to mention a couple of them because they're in the UK. David Gerard is a wonderful crypto skeptic, and Stephen Deal is an incredible crypto skeptic, amongst others. Martin Walker. There's a whole list of crypto skeptics, and it's ironic, but I guess in some ways fitting that I'm the one that's got the public face. So so I'm out there.
One last question before we leave you, because I know you need to shoot, is do you foresee a future for digital currencies in some form? Is it, or not?
Sure. I mean, look at these digital currencies we've got. Here's my digital currency. It's on my phone.
Yeah.
I bought coffee this morning with my phone. Our currencies are already digital, of course. I mean, the vast majority of the money in the world doesn't exist in a physical state. It's ones and zeros and in databases and credit card companies and banks. So we already have digital currency. What will most likely happen is we'll transition into some version of a CBDC, a central bank digital currency. But effectively that already kind of exists. I think the real question that crypto, if there's one good thing about crypto, it's that it points out deep systemic problems with our regulated financial system. And so I do think we should question the power that banks have as sort of like an intermediary between the government and the people. I question whether the banks should be allowed to take on the amount of risk that they almost inevitably end up taking on and then failing and then us bailing them out. That's one thing that I actually agree with the crypto folks on. So I think we can have those conversations, but digital money already exists and has for a while.
Sure. Well, Ben, you won't know this, you've beautifully set up our next speaker. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing the book, which we have available here in the UK. So
Thank you. Yes, it comes out July 27th. Please take a look. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Ben.